Hello. For those of you that are listening, can you please just type something in chat so I can see if the chat is working? Because the chat was not working earlier. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started here because it is 1:20. If they come in late, then they come in late. They can always rewatch the beginning of this. This week, just so you have it all planned out, is I actually unlocked the review already at the end. Um, um, Unlocked there, and I think I have the questions out for it. But today, being the 14th, so on 4/14 today, we are going to look at finding parts, I believe. Is that what today's video is titled? I think it's finding the part. Yeah, finding the part. So today we're going to look at finding the part, which if you don't know what that means, I'll tell you in a second. Tomorrow, 4/15, we're going to look at finding the percent. And Thursday, 4/16, you're going to look at finding the whole. And part and whole, you should be thinking, hey, that makes a fraction. And then 4/17, you're going to have a review, because all of this, in the end, is going to come down to pretty much doing the same thing for each of these. There's just a slight difference in the way that you're going to be thinking each time. So that's kind of what our 4/16 is review. And again, you can probably start the review. There's some questions on there like conversions and stuff like that beforehand. But here we're all about finding parts, finding percents, and finding wholes. So today we're going to find the part. So you do have notes on percents in the slideshow. It's attached to your not your Drive, your Classroom, where you can find these. It's done a little differently in there than what I'm going to do this week. But if you can follow along with that, that's just one way of doing it as well. So today we're going to concentrate on finding the part. And we're going to start with just a random question. I'm not going to write it all out. I'm just going to write the important stuff, but I'm going to talk while I do it so you understand what's actually going on. But let's say that you have a percentage of something. So what I decided upon, I actually stole it out of your book, but let's say that you have that 88% of all farms in the U.S. are family owned. So they're owned by a family. The other remaining percent would be owned by a corporation or maybe a community of some sort. I don't know, but 88% of them are owned by a family. Now, what if I told you that there are 350 farms in the U.S.? I guess I'll put a next to that so I don't look at the word us, in the U.S., right? And then the question that you probably are thinking are, well, how many of those 350 are 88% represents? Clearly 88% does not represent 88 farms because percents are out of 100. This is out of 350. So what you want to do is, this is a find the part problem. You're given a percentage and you're given a total. So keep that in mind. You're given a percentage. In this case, that's 88%. You're given a total. In this case, that's 350 farms. And you're asked, I guess this was a bad way of doing it. What you're given is a total. I should put that with the percent there. And you're asked to find a part of all of it. Right? So I have a total. In this case, it's 350 farms. Right? And I'm asked to find the part. So how do I go about doing that? Well, there are actually a few different ways to do it. One way is to just do it in your head. And that's not too difficult if you know how to find a percent of something. Like I know half of them is 50%, and then I can work from 50% up. 10% is pretty easy to find, 1% is pretty easy to find, and then I can just add them up. That's probably not the way you want to do this problem because 88% is not a nice number to work with. And, well, 350 is not too bad. But that is one way to do it. And you can sit there and you can just use some reasoning skills for it that way. So one way to look at this is just through reasoning. This is one method. I don't know how to spell method. One method to do this. Okay, you can just reason through this. I know I want to find 88% of 350. This here is my question. All this is asking, what is 88% of 350? Well, I know that 10%, well, let's start with 50. I know that 50% of 350 is just half. So half of 350, so therefore 50% equals half of 35 is, what is that, 17? I don't know, I'll just divide it in half. 350 divided by 2 gives me 17.5. So this is half, that's 50%. I know that 10% of this, finding 10%, I just move my decimal point over 1, is 35. So 10% of 350 I know is 35. And I know 1% easily too, because 1% would be moving it over twice. So 1% of 350 equals 3.5. And then you just kind of add up your percents until you get 88%. So in 88%, there's 150%. That brings me to 50. 10 would bring me to 60. Another 10 will bring me to 70. Another 10 will bring me to 80. And then 8 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm all the way down there. Will bring me up. And then I just add up those percents. So 50% was 175. 10% was 35. 10% is 35. 10% is 35. 1% is 3.5. And you have 8 of this, so you could just be like, hey, I'm going to multiply that by 8. I have 8 of these. I have 3 of these, so I got one set of 50 plus 3 sets of 10, 1, 2, 3, plus 8 sets of 3.5. And you can solve that, and that will give you your answer. However, that's not the best way to do it. For some problems, this is the best way, which I'll give you an example in a second. And that's going to equal 308. So 88% of this is 308. Keeping that in mind, that's one way to do it. A better way, set of questions for this, whenever you see things like this, to solve it this way, is tips at restaurants. So like if your bill was $350 at a restaurant, because your whole family went to eat, right? And you want to know your tip, and your tip is normally going to be 20%. So what's 20% of 350? Right? To do that in your head, you find what 10% is first by moving your decimal point one place, which equals 35. And then you have 2 of these, so then you just multiply it by 2. And 35 times 2, 30 times 2 is, 35 times 2 is 70. So then you'd be leaving a $70 tip. That's how you do tips and stuff like that. You could do it the other way I'm going to show you, but this is one way to do things. You can sit there and reason through it by finding percentages that you know. 50% is really easy to find because it's half. 10% is really easy because you move your decimal point one place. 1% is easy because you move your decimal point 2 places. Other ones is 25% is pretty easy because that's half of a half. So to get 25%, you find the 50%, and then you take half of that. So you can think of this as 1/4 or half of a half. In this case, that would be half of 175, which would be 87.5. Right? So this is one way to do it. This is also probably the most complicated way. However, if it is something that is around one of these percents, it's really easy. Even if it was like 26% of a number, you find 25% and find 1% and add them together to get to 26. That's probably the most thinking way that you need to do these. But again, when it comes to writing tips for a restaurant, this is the way you do it. You just do it in your head, right? You get 375, move your decimal point once and multiply by 2, and you get 20%. Let's look at another way that you're probably more comfortable doing, if you're not comfortable doing it this way. Either way will work. Keep in mind, our answer should be 308 farms, something like that. So just keep that in mind. The way that you probably are going to do this, and the way that you are probably going to do everything this week, is by using your definition of percent. Right? You know that a percent, so this is method 2. Okay. Again, either way will work. Some problems it'll be easier to just reason through and find similar percents that you know. Some problems, if you have no clue what's going on, this is more of a systematic way to do it. So again, we're finding a part, and you're going to use some definitions that you know. First off, you know what a percent is. A percent, just by definition, is part of 100. So if you wanted to write a percent as a fraction, you have your percent over 100. And you've been doing that all week with making this percent into a fraction. So this here is just your definition of a percent. The other thing is we're going to define what a fraction is, which you probably know already. A fraction is defined as, in mathematical terms, it's a over b, where b does not equal 0 because you can't divide by 0. But when you were like in first grade learning what a fraction was, you defined it as a part over a whole. And that's what we're going to use today. So we have percent over 100 and part over a whole. These are the two things that you need to know in order to do problems like this systematically and just kind of through algebra. With that being said, you know that this here is a percent, so you can write that as a fraction. Is this link on the classroom? I thought the link was on the classroom. I've been having issues with my live streams today, but I think I figured it out. But anyways, this here is your percentage. So that is 88 over 100 is the same thing as 88%, right? We'll just turn it into a fraction. I'm going to keep the denominator 100. If you'd like to reduce, that's up to you. You're more than welcome to. It might be easier to work with 44 over 100. This problem is not homework, but what we're doing is homework. I will show you what the homework is in a second. Well, according to the Hangout message you just sent me, yeah, I was messing with the live stream link. I thought it started over again. I will repost the video at the end here. I'm not going to mess with the link right now and confuse people more. There's enough people on right now, and then when I post the video, I'll double check that the link went up. What slide should you be following? The slides are putting this all together in one thing. So we are looking at slide 7. Slides 7 through 10 is pretty much all this week. It's really easy stuff once you get into it, but we got to go the long way first. So 88 over 100 is your percentage. And you also know that's a fraction, so that also equals a part over a whole. And when you start reading your context here, you're going to find out that you have a total, which is a whole. Right, so you can set this up as, I don't know where my face is, 88 over 100 is equal to part over whole. Actually, I'll generalize it first. Your percent is equal, your percentage over 100 equals your part over a whole. In this case, that's 88 over 100 is equal to your part over your whole. In this case is 350. And then you can just solve for your unknown here. We'll call this x. And you can just solve by using a proportion. And you solve by cross multiplying. 100 times x gives you 100x. 88 times 350 is a big number. Times 350 gives you 30800. And then you solve for x by dividing each side by 100, which is just going to knock off 2 zeros here. So x equals 308, which is what we got last time too. We just did it a different way. Farms. But yeah, that's the systematic method to do it, and probably the method that you're going to do in class. However, doing it in your head is also beneficial in life. Again, finding tips at a restaurant. That's how you do it. So yeah, we can start questions on the homework. I think Logan asked for 13 using one word. I'll do 13 towards the end. Number one. Yeah, you should probably write things down, Catherine, but I'm deleting it all, so you can write number one down. I forget what number one even asks. I have to look it up. I actually think your book doesn't even give you context with these. I think it just tells you, hey, solve this. Yeah, so number one, you want 35% of 700. And it's asking you is what number, right? So again, there's different ways to do it. We'll start with the first way. Again, the first way is just using percents that are easy to find. We want to get the 35% here, so knowing 25% would probably be good. Knowing 10% would probably be good. Knowing 1% would probably be good. However, for me to get 25%, I have to get 50% first because I'm just not good at, well, this one's not too bad. But I mean, for most parts, you get 50% and then you take half of 50 to get 25. So 50% of 700 is going to be half of it, so that would be 350. 25% would be half of that, which I think we just figured out before, right? 350 divided by 2 is going to give you 175. 10% you find by just moving your decimal point one place, so one place would give me 70. 1% you find by moving your decimal point two places, which will give me 7. And then you sit there and you play with these to get 35. So what can I add here to get to 35? Well, I know, well, even getting 5%, 5% is pretty easy to get too, because that would just be half of 10%. So half of 70 would be 35. So we already have 5%. So there's one way to do it. But then you just find a way to add up to 35 here. So we can do 25, and then you'll have a 10. That'll give you 30%, and then you'll have a 5. So we can just add those numbers up, and we'll get our answer. 25% is 175, 10% is 70, 5% is 35. Just add them up, and you should get 35%. Again, these are your percents, and these are your numbers. So this 25 plus 10 plus 5 gives you 35. And over here, 175 plus 70 plus 35 gives you 280. So 35% is 280. So your answer here would be 280, whatever this is talking about. The other way to do this, so this was, again, method 1. Method 2, the other way of doing this is to set up a proportion. It's always going to be percent over 100, because that's what a percent is defined as, equals part over a whole, because that's whatever a fraction is defined as. So here you have a percent that you want, which is 35 over 100. And your part you're not given, because it's out of 700. So your whole is going to be 700, and this is your unknown. And then you solve for that. So 100 times x is going to give you 100x every time. And 35 times 700 gives you a big number. 35 times 700 is 245. I might have did this wrong. Did I type that in right? I might have to rethink what I did up here. 0, 0, divide that by 100, divide this by 100. 25. Oh, that's because I don't need another 5%. 25 plus 10 gives me 35. I don't know what I was thinking. That gives me 35%, so I only have to add those two up, which is going to give me x equals 245, and then here, 175 plus 70 gives me 245 as well. So this way is probably preferred just because you get to do the algebra and stuff. But yeah, Kelsey, you're right. Yeah, see, I wasn't reading my things. Yeah. So I got that. Thanks, Lyra. Thanks, Kelsey. But yeah, those are the different ways to do it. This one might have been easier because you actually had the two to figure out to get to 35. The other way you could have did is found 50 and subtracted from it as well. I don't even know what else I asked you here. 13. Yeah, so 13 is asking you to do it mentally, which is kind of like the first step, like Logan was saying. 13, you want to find 52% of 150. Again, this is a pretty easy one to do in your head because you can find 50% easily and you can find 1% easily. You just keep in mind you need 2% to add to 52, so you need a 50 plus a 1 plus a 1, or 2 times a 1%. So with that, you can find 50% easily by just doing half, and then you can find 1% easily by just moving your decimal point twice. How would you get 245? Oh, okay, Eli. I'm glad that didn't make sense to you either. It didn't to me. Okay, how would you get 245? For number 1? I can show you number 1 again. Oh, on 13, it's not asking you to actually find the answer, is it? No, it's just asking you to kind of round and explain your method. So number 1 again was 35% of 700. Again, easiest way to do it, percent over 100 equals part over whole. This is a part, this is a percent. The hardest thing about doing this, though, is kind of determining what is a part and what is a whole. The other way you can think of is means multiplication. That means multiplication whenever you see of in math. So you're really just doing 35 times 7. Well, making this a decimal, multiplying it by 700. That's the other way to do these. But again, you can do it this way. So you have 35 over 100 equals x over 700. And then you solve, right? 100 times x gives you 100x. 35 times 75 gives you 204,500. Divide by 100. Divide by 100. X equals 245. One way to do it. I could show you a third way because that means of. Sorry, this isn't number 3. This is method 3. I'll show you another way to do these. Is step 1, make a decimal, take your percent, turn it to a decimal, and then multiply. Step 1. Step 2, multiply. So here that would be times 700 will also equal 245. Different ways. I just showed you 13. Let me show you 13 again, then I'm going to do number 10 with Anna. 13, it is asking you how to get 52% of, what was that number? 150. Approximate it, right? So Logan, you're going to approximate this, right? So it's about, and you know 52% is about 50%, right? So let's find 50% of this. Well, 50% is half of that, so that's 7.5. And then you want 2%, right? Because that's the difference between 50% and 52%. So you want to know what 2% is. Well, in order to find 2%, we need to find what 1% is. 1%, you move this twice, so that equals 1.5. And you want 2 of them. So 2% would be twice this, which would be 3. So 52% is equal to 7.5, which is their 50%, plus 3, which is 2%, right? 50 plus 2 is 52. 7.5 plus 3, 7, 8, 9, is 10.5. So 52% of 150 is 10.5. No, you don't have to take notes on the slideshow. You just have the slideshow to reference. If you forget what's going on, look at the slideshow. It tells you how to do everything. Number 10. What's number 10 say? So again, many ways to do this. The first way is just by using kind of some reasoning. Here, we'll call it reasoning. Okay, so we know that 50% is going to be half. So 50% of 500 is going to be 250. You know that 10%, you move your decimal point one place, so that would be 50. You know that 1%, you move your decimal point two places, so that would be 5. You then have to use these numbers to add up to 62.5. Well, here we'll get 0.5%. 0.5% is half of this, so half of 5 would be 2.5. So then we have to add them up. So you got 50% plus a 10% gives you 60, plus 2 1%, so a 2%, which you can figure out easily, is 10 because that would be twice as many as this. A 2%, and then a 0.5%. So 50% is 250, 10% is 50, 2% is 5, I'm sorry, it's 10, 0.1% is 2.5. So I'm just reasoning through things to get these nice, easy numbers to get, and then I can combine them to get my tough one. So here, just double checking, 50 plus 10 is 60, plus 2 is 62, plus a half is 62.5. So the percents add up to 62.5. And then over here, I just add them up. That's 300, 310, 312.5. That should be your answer for reasoning. You could use another method would be your algebra, which again would be percent over 100 equals part over whole. Percent is 62.5 over 100 equals part, which we do not know, over whole, which is 500. Again, you just got to be able to make sure that you know that this here is a whole and not a part. And I'll give you a trick on how to do that later in the week once we combined all the things we're learning this week to help keep you things straight. So here we're going to multiply 100x equals 62.5 times 500. gives you 3, 1, 2, 5, 0, making sense. Divide that by 100, divide this by 100, x equals 3, 312.5, which is the same thing we got here. You could also do this by multiplying. Multiply. Right, you turn this into a decimal and multiply, so that is 0.625 times 500. And that should equal your 312.5 as well. So any way you want to do it, those are all options for number 10. Can we do number 6, I think, is the next one being asked for. I'm going to take your word that I made a mistake there, Eli. I don't remember what I did. So keep that in mind. Kelsey's asking for number 6. Look at number 6. What does number 6 say? 12% of 220. 12% of 220. Again, you can reason through this one. This one's not too bad, right? 10% is going to be 22 because I move it once. 1% is going to be 2.2 because you move it twice, which means 2% is going to be twice this, which would be 4.4. And then you just take 10% plus 2%. There's 2%. This is 22. This is 4.4. Add everything. This becomes 12%. And 22 plus 4 gives you 26.4. So that's one way to do it. You could set it up as a proportion, so you could use your algebra for it, which is percent over 100 equals part over whole, which is 12 over 100 equals x over, what is your whole, 220? 12 times, well, 100 times x is 100x. 12 times 220 hopefully is giving you that. I'm going to double check because I don't know if I did my work right up above. Yep. Divide by 100, divide by 100, x equals 26.4. Or you can sit there and multiply it. And again, make that a decimal, so 0.12 times 220 gives you that 276.4. So any way you want to do it, pick one that you're more comfortable with. I highly suggest you get used to doing it this way, just because you can do it in your head. You'll note that I don't really use the calculator much when I do it that way. I also suggest you learn the algebra for it because it's going to help out a lot. I mean, they're all good ways to do it. It depends on the question, really, whichever way you think is the best. Sarah's asking for 5. I'll add them to the list, and then let's do number 5 first. Number 5 says 65% of 320. Again, we'll start with the reasoning. 65% of 320, I probably want 50%. I probably want 10%. That would make 60, and I probably want 5%. So I can get 50% easily by taking half of that. Half of, what is that? Half of 32 is 16, so that's 160. 10%, again, you get by moving your decimal point one place, which is 32. 5% would be half of 10%, so half of 32 would give me 16. And then I just add them all up. Right, 50 plus 10 plus 5 gives me 65. 160 plus, I'm just going to do it on the calculator. 160 plus 32 plus 16 is going to give me 208. Is that what I should be getting? Yep, that's what I should be getting. You can do it algebraically by doing 65 over 100 equals x over 320. Uh, 2080 divide by 100, divide by 100, x equals 208. You can do it by multiplying, just by, again, turning that into a decimal, 0.65, and multiplying it by 320. Any way you want, Sarah. I'm not going to ask you to distinguish between which way you do it on a test. Whichever way you're more comfortable with, do it that way. Again, this is nice to know just for everyday life. This here will be the easiest method when we get to the other things, because all what's going to happen for the week is this variable is going to jump around this little proportion. So it's all going to be the same thing for all problems like this. You have to know where to put the variable in. This might be helpful to you, but when you get into the other versions of these questions, like if I ask for the percent or if I ask for the missing part or the missing whole, then this is going to change drastically to you probably. Let's see, Catherine wants 8. Did we do 8? I don't think we did 8 yet. Let's look at 8. 8 is saying 20% of 410. This one's not bad to reason through. You should all be reasoning on this one. Right, 20% is just 10% plus 10%. 10% is 41. 41, because again, 10%, you moved your decimal point one place. And then just add them up. So 40 plus 40 gives you 82. 20% is 82. You can do it algebra. Again, it's going to be 20 over 100 equals x over 410. When you're doing the multiplication method, Eli, you're not going to be multiplying. So your operation is going to change. And you just got to pay attention to context and how that's going to work out. I mean, it's not impossible to do. It's just, I think it takes more thinking. Of course, this takes a lot of thinking too. And I don't know, what is 20 times 420? Apparently, it's going to be that. Divide that by 100, divide that by 100. X equals 82. Over here, you can just do 0.2 times 410, which is going to give you 82. This, it works the same way this does, only you're doing, like here you have 20 over 100. This works the same way as this. We're just making this a decimal first. So then you have 0.2 is equal to some number divided by 410. So you do the inverse operations, which is multiply by 410 here. So there's your times 410. Yeah, Anna, you can use a calculator. Yeah, you could just multiply. It's fine. 9. Mine's pretty easy. 25% of, what is that, 150? Remember, 25% is half of a half. It's a fourth. So divide this in half and then get your answer and divide it in half again. So that's how we're going to do this, through reasoning. So 50% is half of that. So half of 150 is half of 50. I'm blanking on this. Is that 75? Yeah, it's 75. And then half of that, right? And so 25% would be half of the 50%. So half of 75 is 37.5. So that's your answer there. Or you could set it up as 25 over 100 equals x over 150. 100x equals 3750 divided by 100 divided by 100. X equals 37.5. Or you can just do 0.25 times 150. Any way you want. 12. Number 12 says a book in Washington costs $40. Cost is $40, but it's on sale for 10% off. A book in Alabama costs $40 and it's not on sale. Really? It's a stupid question. This is Washington. This is Alabama. They cost the same, but this one's 10% off. That one's cheaper. Would you rather pay $40 or would you rather pay 10% off of $40? You're saving money. I don't know what the book is trying to get out there, but it's just that simple. Oh, you're using that table over there. I didn't read the directions on that. I just thought that went with the one above it. Yeah. All right, we'll find sales tax. So if we're in Washington and it costs $40, we are taking off, we're going to subtract 10% from it because you're going to save 10%. And then you're going to add on sales tax in Washington is 6.5%. So if we're doing this first, order of operations says to go left to right with addition and subtraction. We're going to take off 10% first. So we got to find 10% of 40. So we're doing 10% of $40 first. So that's going to be, again, move your decimal point 1, that's $4. Right? And then you want to find 6.5% as well. We can find 5% easily because that would be just half of this, which would be $2. We can find 1% pretty easily. because that would be moving it twice, which is 40 cents. And we can find 0.5% pretty easily, because that would just be half of 1%, which would therefore be, we have equal signs there, 2 cents or 20 cents. This is money. I'll put that there. So total price of this is going to be your $40. You're going to subtract 10% from that, so that would be minus $4, and you're left with $36. Then you're going to add $2, or then you're going to add 6.5%. So to get 6.5%, you need to add 5% plus 1% gives you 6% plus 0.5%. So this will give you 6.5%. 5% is 2, 4, 2, that's $2.60 plus $2.60 gives you $38.60, which is still cheaper than the $40 from before. So sales tax does not get 10% off too. In fact, percents aren't even going to work that way. You're going to be taxed based off of however much you actually pay. So you take the discount first, and then they're going to figure out the tax from that amount. So you're getting taxed on the $36. You get taxed on the actual money that exchanges hands. So anytime money exchanges hands, it technically should be taxed, and the government steps in and takes some. In this case, $36 is exchanging hands, so $36 is what is taxed. Let's see, 2. Number 2. You figured it out, Anna? You sure? What'd you get? Type in your answer. Let's look at 11. The shirt in Washington costs $24. How much sales tax will be added to the price? Okay, so we want a $24 shirt, and it's 6.5% tax. So that's $24 plus an additional 6.5%. So we want to find out what 6.5% of 6.5% of 24. Again, you could just multiply it, but let's do it through reasoning, because I think reasoning is more fun. That is a 4. I think you should be getting 72, Anna. So check your work. This one says, what am I doing? 6.5% of 24. So again, let's find 10%, so we can get to 5%, and then 1%, and then 0.5%. So let's start with 10%. 10%, again, you're just going to move your decimal point once, so that's 2.4. 5% would be half of that, so half of 2.4 is 1.2. 1% is if you move this twice, which would be 0.24. And 0.5% would be half of this number, which would be 0.12. Okay, I'll go over number 2 when you're done. So we want to get to 6.5%. That is a 5% plus a 1% plus a 0.5%. this is going to equal 6.5%. 5% we know is 1.2. 1% we know is 0.24, and 0.5% is 0.12. So we just add them together. That's 36. That's no, if you understand it, you can go. I mean, class has been over for 13 minutes now. I can answer questions tomorrow. Tomorrow's lesson is going to be very simple. But if you want to stay on, I'll still do them. Like, I'm still going to do number 2 with Anna when we're done here, just to check her work. Wait, for 12 it's Washington? Yeah, for 12 it's Washington. Add them up. I lost my train of thought. That's what? 36, 40, 56, 156. So you're paying $1.56 in tax. This is how much tax there is. I don't remember what it asked. Did it ask for the total price, or no? I just asked for tax. If you want to know how much you're paying, you would then take your $24 and add that to your, or add your tax to it, and that'll be how much you're paying. Do you want me to do 2, Anna? I'll do 12 again. Let me know if you want me to do 2. $40 shirts, 10% off, and 6.5% tax. Versus just a $40 shirt with however much tax was that on. I guess I didn't do that part. It'll still be less though. 4% versus a $40 shirt with 4% tax. So those are the 2 you're comparing. 4% of 40 is pretty easy to find because, again, 1% is going to be moving this twice, so that's 40 cents. So 4% would be just times 4 because you want 4 of these, or just add 4 of them, however you want to do it. I don't know. So you get 16 cents. That's not right. 1.6. $1.60. So here you're paying, this is Alabama. Alabama, you're paying $41.60. Right, 4% of 40. Again, you could have done it the other ways. I'm just doing it this way today. You could have set up proportions. 4 over 100 equals x over 40. X equals 160. X equals 1.6. Right. That way was probably easier, actually. But you could do it that way. And then you just add that on to your $40, and that's where we're getting this price here for Alabama. So Alabama's that. Washington is a little different. Washington, we have this 10% discount. So let's find our discount first. So we're going to subtract 10% of 40. 10% of 40 is 4. So 10% off means you're paying $36. Because 40 minus 4 gives you 36. Yeah, you can do it that way. It's whatever you're comfortable with. I showed you 3 different ways to do it today. Whatever you're comfortable with, go with that. Here we have, then we need 6.5% of the 36, not the 40 like we did over, we didn't do anywhere. We need 6.5% of this. So again, 10% To get 5%, you want to find 10% first, which is 3.6. So 5% is half of that. Half of 36 is 15, 16, 18, 1.8. To get 1%, move your decimal point one place out of the 36, so that is, or I'm sorry, get 1%, move it twice, so that's 0.36. And to get 0.5%, you take half of this, which is 0.18. And then you add it up. I mean, just by looking at it, you know it's not going to be more than $40. So you can do it that way. But when we add this up, you get, actually, we don't want the 10% in there. 5 plus 1 plus 0.5 gives you the 6.5%. So we know these are going to work. 1.8 plus 0.36 plus 0.18 equals 234. Add that to here, and you get. So you're comparing this price to this price. This is cheaper. All right, let me look through the chat here and see if I got everything. If I missed something, write it in there. I think I got everyone's question. So with that, I'm going to end it. I'm going to make everything due Friday from here on out. Like whatever I give you during the week, get it in by Friday. That just gives people who have a struggling schedule a little more time and less stress. So let's just make that happen from now on. And I'll try to get things updated over the weekends the best I can. I am a bit slow on grades right now because we're not really sure how it's all going to work out in the end, and I'll be better understanding things on Thursday after our meeting. But that's it for today. If you have more questions, shoot me an email, but I've been talking way too long. So we'll pick up tomorrow. Tomorrow, if you understand this, you're going to understand tomorrow pretty easily. The rest of the week, actually, it's all really the same thing. It's just going to be moving things around here and there. All right.